Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcasts on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There is no downside. I teach you on a daily basis, answer your questions, and you will have control of your health, and you'll be a part of a great like-minded group to support you on your journey. In addition to taking control of your health, my goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends that may need my help. Today we are talking about the health benefits of Himalayan salt. And it's all the rage, right? You want to go out and get the pink salt. Well, we're going to first get into the importance of salt and the wrong salt, the right salt, and then get into Himalayan salt. And this is a topic very close to my heart because my son, as most of you know, at the age of 9, he had to overcome leukemia and did so with the help of Accelerated Health products. But then in high school, he is a go-getter. He does not. He goes from 0 to 100 or 150. And he was in rowing sport and was overtraining without supplementing. And these kids today, they are not being taught nutrition. They're not being taught the right pre and post workout supplements or things they need. And they're training 3 to 4 hours. It's ridiculous. So here we are, sophomore year. He is at the top of his game, and his heart was stopping. He was having arrhythmia, but then his heart was actually stopping. And we were told, oh my goodness, he got tested. His scan showed that he had high sodium in his blood. So what do? Well, we were told to lower his sodium, right? Well, did that help? Okay, so then we continue on. And there was a night where I hear this pounding on the wall, and that was at 2 a.m. And I run in, and he is pounding on his chest to get his heart to start again. His heart literally had stopped for about 30 seconds, and I couldn't do anything. I just was standing there in fear, and it started up again. Well, when I went to our practitioner and I said, well, okay, what started his heart back up again? Why did it start? And he goes, well, he has a young, good heart. He's 15 years old. If he didn't, then he wouldn't have started up again. The problem was that he was not supplementing with electrolytes. And when we talk about salt, we're not talking about just sodium. And that is the misnomer. Sodium does not equal salt. Salt equals the salt in the salt water that has over 60 to 70 minerals in it, including potassium and magnesium and chloride, all the things that our body needs. We came from the ocean. Our blood plasma is like the right composition of minerals that is in that salt water. So here we are in a world of supplements where a lot of electrolyte formulas are man-made, where the formulator is saying, oh, I want a little more of this and a little less of this, where really we need to look at what nature has intended. So wanted to give that story. Oh, this was the other interesting thing with my son. So we got his test and the sodium was high. We wrongfully lowered his salt out of his diet. And then we retested him. Mind you, he's miserable. He's nauseous, he's having headaches, not performing as well. And we're thinking, oh, we're just going to give him potassium. Well, yes, that helped a little bit. But what was interesting is on his test, on his scan, his sodium didn't change. Why? Why would the sodium not change when he went on a low salt diet and he lowered all of that sodium out of his diet? Because the body's smart. We've talked about unexplained weight gain. We've talked about what the body does when it's in survival mode. If you lower your calories to less than 1,000 calories a day, the body's going to say, oh, well, she's not giving me enough food. I'm going to slow down my metabolism. Well, what happens when the body stops getting the sodium it needs, right? It says, oh, well, I'm going to hold on to all that sodium that I get in, and every morsel of food that comes in that has even the trace mineral of sodium, I'm going to hold on to it. So now that boy is supplementing with the right salt, the accelerated ancient salt, the electrolyte formulas that we have. And do you think his sodium in his blood has increased? No, because the body says, oh my gosh, now I'm happy. He's giving me everything I need. So I'm going to actually let go of that sodium and let go of what I don't need, especially when I'm not overeating processed foods and carbs. So there's my story. It's really, really important to know the difference between the right salt and just stripped down table salt or sodium and that's full of microplastics, and we're going to get into all of that. So there have been wars that were fought over salt. Salt was like money back in the day, but it was that ancient seabed sea salt with the trace minerals that we were talking about, not over that table salt that tastes like plastic at the restaurant. So when did things change? In 1977, we received advice to eat a low-fat diet and a low-salt diet. Senator George McGovern and his committee led that push for the low-fat and the low-salt dietary guidelines. And they told us to eat 1.2 grams of sodium based on scientific opinions, and it didn't work, right? So they were showing that there was a rise in blood pressure from eating a normal amount of sodium. But what was wrong was the study was not done correctly. These requirements of the people were to eat a low potassium diet and be genetically susceptible. This was a small amount of the population, and they discarded those details to make a blanket statement that all people should stick to a low salt diet. Later, salt was wrongfully attacked in an unfounded 1984 NHANES study, and that created more pressure for that low salt diet. It was a faulty study because it was conducted with table salt, like we've talked about, and the only rise in blood pressure, which was very insignificant, was from an ethnic tribe that had never consumed processed refined salt before. And since that time, there has been unwarranted fear of the salt. So that is the backstory of why we've been told. You have to look at why are we being told not to have high cholesterol? What is behind the salt? What is behind the blood pressure risks and all of these things? You got to follow the money, guys. You got to follow the money. So with that, it is creating a problem with the sodium potassium pump. The sodium potassium pump drives nutrients into the cells and escorts the toxins out of the cells through the cellular water of every single one of your 100 trillion cells in our body. So you really need to understand that. And when you're talking about intracellular hydration versus extracellular hydration. Extracellular hydration is that puffiness, the swollenness that you get from eating Chinese food or sushi where you're having the wrong kind of salt or you're inflamed. Intracellular hydration is the hydration inside the cell that makes the cells function. That's what we need. And to pump out those toxins, we need salt. Animals will walk miles to lick a rock with salt. My dog, this is gross and maybe TMI, however, when I get out of my sauna and I'm sweaty, my dog will come straight for me and try to lick my legs because I have salt coming out of my skin. That's right. Farmers used to take salt tablets as they were working in the fields. What do you get when you go to the emergency room for trauma? an IV of saline or salt. There are only 5 grams of glucose in your bloodstream at one time. Think about that. If you're having a cookie that has about 30 grams of sugar, how much your body has to process when your body only can hold 5 grams of glucose in the blood at one time, while there's 16 grams of sodium in your bloodstream at the same time. Sugar is driving that high blood pressure and heart disease, and not sodium. The kidneys will retain salt when you eat a high carb diet because it's soaking it up, but also the carbs are usually from processed foods that are full of the wrong kind of sodium, that's full of microplastics, and then also all these preservatives and ingredients that the body doesn't even recognize as foods and sees as a toxin. And when you're on a ketogenic or a low carb diet, your kidneys release sodium and potassium. That's why it's super important to supplement with electrolytes when you switch to a low carb diet. We lose about 2 teaspoons of salt with 4 cups of coffee. So coffee is a diuretic. I drink my coffee. Yep, I do. But I make sure that I follow it up with my accelerated ancient salt. Things that make you lose salt. I actually had a question in my group today. How much of the electrolytes should they be taking a day? Well, if you're sedentary, 1 serving. But if you're exercising, if you're in hot weather, low carb diet, you're doing finals or high brain, use of brain and mental function, all of that uses up the salt very quickly. Once you go on the ketogenic or low carb diet, most people correct their high blood pressure. Imagine that. And you're having more salt, right? More electrolytes. Table salt is stored in mounds of salt dunes to dry in the sun while collecting seagull and other bird droppings. So not only does that table salt have the microplastics that it's been proven to have, but it's got seagull and other bird droppings. So there you go. That's what you're flavoring your food with. The raw ancient seabed sea salts have a chemical structure of sodium chloride and all of the valuable trace minerals, over 62 different trace minerals. Table salt, primarily sodium chloride, and during its refinement, those trace minerals are stripped and sold off to the other industries to use and probably put into the electrolytes that you're then paying extra money for. Iodine is another mineral missing in table salt, which everyone needs to be taking their iodine. We're going to get into that in a little more, in a little bit. It is added to some table salt to create that iodized salt, but unfortunately, less than 20% of the table salt is iodized anymore. If you're craving salt, you need salt. Salt controls your potassium and your magnesium balance. If you're low on potassium and magnesium, you're getting the leg cramps and all, you need that salt as well. No study shows that lowering salt causes an increase in heart failure or mortality rate. In fact, lowering salt in your diet can cause an increase in all-cause mortality. And most people with a high risk of heart disease are already on medication that are diuretics, ridding the body of salt. So look at the side effects of your heart medication. It literally is trying to lower your blood pressure by taking the water out. So what happens when you take water out of balsamic vinegar and you start to make a balsamic reduction? It becomes like molasses, right? So it's moving through the veins and the arteries like molasses, and you're lowering your blood pressure because it doesn't have to pump as much, right? But it's having to work a lot harder because your blood becomes molasses. That's what's happening. So you have a large retention of fluid to salt ratio because the body's not able to pump that thick fluid around the body that mimics molasses. Now imagine if your body's trying to get rid of all the toxins that we talk about. It can't because that thick fluid is like molasses. So how much salt should you have in a day? We're told no more than 2 grams a day, but we really need 3 to 6 grams of sodium a day, which equates to about 1.5 to 1 3/4 teaspoons a day. During exercise, you lose about a half to 1 teaspoon of salt per hour of exercise. If you're exercising in 80 to 90 degrees, you want to take a half a teaspoon of salt with 12 ounces of water about a half hour before your workout, and it will do wonders. If you're doing high intensity training, weightlifting, or cardio, you will also benefit and be able to work out longer. It's been proven that when you preload with salt, it allows you to exercise 21 minutes longer before you get fatigued. Here we are spending all this money on pre-workout supplements, right? And protein powders and all of that. Just by putting a little salt in your water, you're going to get the same benefit. This increases your plasma volume, which cools you down and your heart rate is lower. And no pre-workout supplement can do this. So if you don't have enough salt, what happens? Your body will literally pull magnesium, calcium, sodium, and potassium from the bones to trick your body into thinking you have enough magnesium and calcium and stop the absorption of those essential minerals. So think about what it's doing to your bones. Here we are supplementing with Bone Up and other bone supplements like calcium, but our bodies are going to literally pull those out because we need to have a specific pH in our blood, in our stomach, in all different parts of our body. And those minerals are the most alkaline minerals. If your body goes acidic, it's going to pull those minerals into your blood away from your bones. Remember here, the body is wanting to survive. It's all about survival. So we're going to sacrifice our bone health for the acidity in our blood. Because if our blood gets too acidic, we die, right? So it needs to do everything it can. And that's why another reason you need to be supplementing with the salt for your bone health. To conserve more sodium, your body is also going to sweat out more magnesium and calcium. So this is probably what was going on in my son's body when he was working out for 4 hours a day. To conserve that sodium, he's sweating out all of these other minerals that he needs, and his body just could not catch up. Aldosterone, which is one of the stress hormones, increases, which kicks out magnesium in the urine. Low salt diets can lead to a 5% higher heart rate and only an insignificant 1% reduction in blood pressure. So this is hurting everybody. And when you multiply these, you're at a higher risk for heart disease. Low salt increases stress hormones and stiffens the arteries. It increases chronic hypertension. It can lead to insulin resistance and worsen your diabetes. And on the other hand, increasing the salt might rival the same results you can achieve from metformin in lowering your blood sugar. So that salt is really important for your insulin resistance. And most of you are walking around with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or diabetes. Your low salt diet increases triglycerides. That's not a number your doctor wants to be high, right? And your body controls your salt intake. It is called the salt thermometer. So when you don't get enough salt, sugar and drugs like Adderall or cocaine can hijack that salt gauge. And you're at a higher risk for other addictions to things like recreational drugs or sugar when you're salt depleted. In fact, your body, when you're craving sugar, you actually might be just craving salt, and your brain has the wiring get crossed. So what are the symptoms of sodium deficiency? When you go from a seated to a standing position, you get dizzy. This is because you don't have enough circulating blood volume. Muscle cramps, muscle spasms, exercise fatigue. You get the cramps in your calves at night when you go to sleep. If your sodium level is within normal range on a blood test, could you still be sodium deficient? Yes, that's what happened with my son. Look at your BUN number on the blood test. If it's high and your water intake is normal, it means you don't have good adrenal blood flow or kidney blood flow. So there we go. I want to now dive into Himalayan salt. because that's, that is the craze, right? Himalayan salt. This is the discovery of Himalayan salt can be traced back to the army of Alexander the Great. The first recordings of mining are from the 13th century, and most of the mines are done in Pakistan now. It's primarily exported in bulk and processed in other countries for the consumer market. So why Himalayan salt? What are the benefits? It's rich in the minerals that we're talking about. It contains the trace minerals like potassium, magnesium, calcium, and iron, and all of that is needed for the body, including that and maintaining that the electrolyte balance, muscle function, bone health that we've all talked about. And it also, as I mentioned, curbs sugar cravings. So when you're depleted of sodium, it evokes a process in the central nervous system that induces that motivation to satisfy that sodium appetite. Now, this is why those big food companies are so smart. All of that processed food, what is it full of? Sugar and salt and fat. When you are in nature, when you are eating whole foods, you tell me where there is a food that has fat and carbs and sugar and salt all in one. So what's going on here is this is messing with our messaging in our brain. So we are wanting to satisfy a sodium appetite. It goes haywire. The messages actually trigger cravings for sugar, and that's why we always go for the quick fix of the processed foods. The neurons start responding to the sweets, such as fructose and sucrose, in response to the sodium cravings. And when you eat the sugar and the salt, or just the sugar, the brain gets the signals mixed up, thinks it's satisfying the salt cravings, and just from doing that a few times, your brain creates a habit loop of satisfying the sodium when you have the sugar cravings, or with the sugar cravings. And likewise, the opposite is true. So when you're sufficient in salt, sugar cravings are minimized. So what is my key for my customers that want to suppress their appetite and fast? Put a little of the accelerated ancient salt on their tongue, and it helps, and it does wonders. If you're depleted in the sodium, it's going to evoke that response, right? Okay, so where salt goes, water goes. When you consume mineral depleted salt in combination with the processed foods, your body will reduce its production of urine and hold on to that water, and it will stay in the blood. As the water increases in the blood, the volume and the pressure of the blood increases. And this is why doctors think lowering salt in your diet will reduce your blood pressure and heart disease. Do you see where it's confusing? The fact is that lowering the processed foods, sugars, and carbs will lead to lower insulin, in turn reverse that type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, heart disease, and high blood pressure. As you lower the carbs, increase the high quality Himalayan salt, which is included in the accelerated ancient salt, you're getting all of the minerals, not just the sodium, and then you're also going to reduce that craving for sodium and sweets. Okay, so Himalayan salt lowers blood sugar. In an experiment, participants were divided into two groups, one with a high salt intake, another with a low salt intake, and the researchers assessed the insulin sensitivity. Among those in the low sodium diet, there was no notable alteration in blood pressure. Their fasting insulin levels rose when compared to the high sodium group. And then the participants in the high sodium group experienced a reduction in blood sugar. And this indicates a significant relationship between the sodium consumption and blood sugar and insulin levels. So one more way of enhancing your overall heart health, your insulin resistance. And remember, insulin resistance at the level of the heart is heart disease. Insulin resistance at the liver is diabetes. Insulin resistance at the ovaries is PCOS. Insulin resistance at the brain is dementia and Alzheimer's. So if we're correcting the insulin resistance with the proper salts, just imagine what you're doing to not just your heart health, but also your brain, your gonads, your liver, everything. And as I mentioned, the Himalayan salt lowers heart disease. And these diets that are with the processed foods, they are increasing that wrong type of salt, lacking the essential minerals and inflammatory ingredients such as the vegetable oils and the GMOs. So not only are you retaining a ton of water, and you've got the carbs and the wrong kind of salt, but you got these microplastics, the vegetable oils, the GMOs. That is poison. The body sees it as poison. What does the body do with poison? It encapsulates those poisons or toxins in fat cells and takes it out of the blood, puts it on your body as stored fat. So here we are trying to lose all of this unexplained weight gain, lowering calories, right? Eating your SnackWell's little 100-calorie packs that's full of processed foods and these ingredients we're talking about, and you're not losing weight. But actually, you're lowering your metabolism, and it's doing the exact wrong thing that you want it to do. So combining the carbohydrates, the processed foods, the inexpensive sodium, inflammatory oils, this is not only going to increase heart disease, but increase your blood pressure, diabetes, and all of the other diseases that we've talked about. The heart needs a complete salt with all of the minerals, not just the stripped down one. And this is what I was talking about with my son. He needed the complete salt with the potassium, magnesium, chloride, and salt and sodium that helps with the sodium potassium pump and the heart muscle, right? The heart is a muscle, it's electrical, and the sodium potassium pump inside and outside the cell helps with that. The heart needs, okay, so with the heart disease, like I mentioned, most people are already on heart medication, which are diuretics, and that is exacerbating the sodium imbalance. Then you'll have struggles with fluid retention and that thickened fluid when the sodium drops low. Himalayan salt actually has lower sodium content because it has all of the other minerals in it, right? So that is another benefit. You get a lot of flavor from a lower sodium compared to the other minerals in it. It's mostly, and we're going to get into that in a minute, natural and unprocessed. Definitely more naturally and natural and unprocessed than table salt. It helps that intracellular hydration. We talked about that. Getting that hydration inside the cell to kick out the toxins. And this is really important for athletes and individuals that are prone to dehydration. Most of you are walking around dehydrated, and it's not because you don't drink enough water. You can overhydrate and actually dehydrate your body just with water. So this is, it helps with the fluid inside the cells, where table salt increases that extracellular hydration. This kind of salt, the Himalayan salt, can actually help with respiratory benefits. That's why you see salt lamps, right? Inhaling Himalayan salt particles through devices like the salt lamps or salt inhalers is believed by some to improve respiratory conditions, including allergies and asthma. But there's no claims here. Obviously, it tastes good, and it naturally helps with those salt lamps, help with just air purification and helping with calming the mood, right? Okay, so we've talked about why we need salt, and I've mentioned the sodium potassium pump, but I want to go into this a little bit more because it is it's going back to chemistry class. It's vital for cellular health and the proper balance of sodium and potassium ions inside and outside of the cell. It's a type of active transport mechanism that requires energy, and we talk about ATP as your true cellular energy. We want to increase ATP in our body, right? So it it requires ATP to move these ions against their concentration gradients from areas of lower concentration to areas of higher concentration. What does that mean? If you don't have ATP, then your sodium potassium pump is going to suffer. So the pump begins with the binding of 3 sodium ions from the intracellular or inside the cell side of the cell to a specific binding site on the pump protein. ATP is split into ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, and an inorganic phosphate, providing the energy needed for the pump's activity. The phosphate group is then added to the pump, activating it. Okay, so this is how it's working. The activated pump undergoes a conformational change that allows it to translocate the bound sodium ions to the extracellular or outside of the cell. And then the altered conformation of the pump exposes potassium binding sites to the extracellular environment. 2 potassium ions from the extracellular space then binds to these sites. Okay, I know we're getting really deep into the science and the chemistry of it, but I want to make sure you guys understand the importance. What are you doing with just sodium without the potassium? The binding of potassium ions triggers that dephosphorylation of the pump, causing it to return to its original and then the phosphate group is released. So as the pump returns to its original shape, it releases the bound potassium ions into the intracellular cell. Okay, and then it just repeats. So this is really important for the health of every single cell of the body. We have so many toxins in our cells that we need to get out, and we have so many nutrients that need to get into the cells. When my son was 9 and we found out that he had leukemia, when we looked at his blood underneath a microscope, his cells were all clumped together and they looked like donut holes. So there was a circle around it, and then there was a big hole in the center of each cell. That hole meant that there was no nutritional nutrients in the cell, right? And they were all stacked together because they were very acidic and no nutrients could get into the cells. There wasn't proper amount of sodium, potassium. When you see healthy cells underneath the microscope, they're nice and dark and round and separated, right? So that way the body can get the nutrients into the cells and the toxins out. So back to Himalayan salt, it is not all the same. This is where you need to be a little careful of just going to Whole Foods Market and taking any Himalayan salt off of the shelf. The mining contamination. Table salt, yes, we've got the bird droppings and the explosives and the refinery problems and the microplastics, but even with Himalayan salt, the mining of the salt involves extraction of salt crystals from the mines, and there's a possibility for encountering contaminants such as explosives, because they use explosives to help mine the salt. And most Himalayan salt has these explosive residues in their salt. And Himalayan salt is known to be high in fluoride. Fluoride is known to be a neurotoxin, and fluoride's in our water, and that's why it's so important to be supplementing with the accelerating iodine that kicks out the fluoride, bromide, and chlorine, right? But most Himalayan salts have high levels of fluoride. Quality control. Some sources use dirty and antiquated mining equipment to transport their salt, giving them potential contaminants, including those explosives. And in many regions, there's no regulatory bodies to setting the standards and guidelines for the production and distribution of these Himalayan salts. Then also, when you're purchasing Himalayan salt, it's essential to choose a supplier that has that third-party verification. There are a lot of Himalayan salts that are sold out there that are not Himalayan salt. So these are things to make sure that you're looking at And with the accelerated salt, you can be assured that I looked into the fluoride content. It is very low. And we have used, we hand mined, literally hand pick and look at every grain of salt. So the accelerated in ancient salt, we now have a shaker, but I love this. I mean, we go through it so fast. It comes into a 32-ounce jar. It is the most beautiful, best tasting salt. And then I also have my small little dish that I take with me everywhere I go, because I can open it, put a little bit on my tongue if I'm trying to suppress my appetite, or use it as at a restaurant or somewhere else that I'm eating salt. But it is a natural blend that includes the Himalayan salt, sourced from untainted regions, and we've also included the Andes salt and salt from Utah. So it creates this unique blend that like no other. Every grain of salt is vigilantly inspected or mined deep enough into sedimentary layers that pre-exist the invention of all this man-made stuff and all of our toxins. We don't use any synthetics or explosives. And all of these rigorous methods that we are using, we don't wash, bleach, heat, refine, or use any chemical process with the accelerated ancient salt. It's free of shells, rocks, plastics, microplastics, explosives, residues, the pollutants, the chemicals, the bleach, the anti-caking, the free-flowing agents that are in all these supplements, preservatives, artificial ingredients, stabilizers, conditioners, and bird droppings, or any other toxins. So we're using it to help detox the body instead of giving you more toxins. So it's also, unlike any other salt out there, especially Himalayan salt, it's enhanced with scalar frequencies to help detox the body and improve that intracellular hydration. It holds that powerful negative charge. So go back to chemistry again. We want to have a negative charge to attract the positive charge of all toxins, parasites, undigested fats. Another little tip for with the accelerated ancient salt, I had mentioned in another podcast, I was suffering from nausea at the beginning of the year. I, of course, needed my liver flush, took care of it. But during that nausea, the only thing that helped was putting a little bit of the accelerated ancient salt on my tongue, because it helps nausea. It helps with the undigested fats. Nausea comes from your gallbladder and your liver. If your gallbladder and liver are backed up, you're not going to be metabolizing fats and proteins very well. And they are going to tell you. So when you eat fat, especially, you are going to get more nauseous. So we use quantum mechanics and take that raw material of the accelerating ancient salt. It creates a scalar field, and that amplifies the salt's frequency. And the scalar energy helps organize your DNA structure even. And so there's no salt that comes close to providing the same health benefits as accelerated ancient salt. So once again, you're getting true Himalayan salt with the salt from the Andes and the Utahs. Now, I want to end with the connection between the salt and the iodine and the adrenals. Your adrenals are your battery packs, right? And especially women in their perimenopausal age, menopausal age, our adrenals take on a whole nother level of job just by helping with our female hormones as our ovaries start to die. So really important to take care of your adrenal health. That's why most people are so tired. Well, salt is the most important adaptogen for the adrenals. And when the body's salt deficient, it becomes hypovolemic, which means low in fluids or dehydrated. And what we need to get properly hydrated with normal fluids, you need to dilute the waste in the body and remove it from the body. It needs to, if you have the lower volume, your blood's going to become thicker and dirtier and more toxic. When the body is salt sufficient, It holds about 10.5 gallons of water for the average adult. Dehydration is from a lack of salt that causes the body to release vasopressin and histamine that literally closes off less important capillaries in the body. Otherwise, blood pressure would plummet. Once again, the body's smart. This is survival. Trying to fill up the body's circulation highways. So salt plumps up the circulatory highways, including the capillaries, arteries, and veins. So the adrenals produce aldosterone, which is for balancing cellular osmotic pressure in the body. And osmotic pressure involves fluid. Aldosterone can only do so much if the body's salt deficient, and so it lowers and if it's low in the bodily fluid. So in other words, aldosterone cannot manage osmotic pressure when the body is deficient in salt or fluid. Salt is also imperative for kidney health, which is directly related to the adrenals. Remember, the kidneys hold the adrenals. So if your adrenals are tapped, your kidneys will inflame. Kidney balances the acidity of the blood and dirty blood, which becomes acidic due to the salt deficiency and taxes the adrenals and the kidneys. When you're salt deficient, the adrenals have to produce 7 hormones in order for the kidneys to be able to reabsorb the precious salt that would be otherwise urinated out. So these hormones, renin, angiotensin 2, aldosterone, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and this is why it's important to use more salt when you're mentally focused. When your brain is engaged, you're using these stress hormones too. You need to support your adrenals and your kidneys at that same time. Producing these hormones use up a lot of energy and a lot of mitochondrial producing ATP. And the number one reason for mitochondrial failure is iodine deficiency. And that's why it's so important to be using the acceleradine. If the body's deficient in salt, then it uses iodine reserves, and that burns up rapidly, to produce an overabundance of these stress hormones. So what do you need? You need the accelerated ancient salt, right? With all 62 minerals. And then you need the acceleradine iodine. It comes back to acceleradine iodine, accelerated ancient salt, and water. The acceleradine iodine increases ATP in the mitochondria by 18 times. It cleans the liver and the dirty blood. If you're complaining about estrogen dominance and hormonal imbalance, especially now after the pandemic, the acceleradine iodine is cleansing those xenoestrogens and the toxins out of the blood, cleansing the liver, cleansing that dirty blood. It increases T4 and T3 thyroid hormones to optimize energy and thyroid function, heals scar tissue inside the body, not just the ones you can see. And that is really important. And that scar tissue inside the body creates dirty and acidic blood. Remember, we want to get away from acidity in the blood. It improves mood and lowers that perceived stress that we've talked about. Remember, your stress is going to be there. You can't do anything about it. You got to lower how you perceive it, and that will help your adrenals as well. And then it supports cellular energy to ease the stress on the adrenals. Acceleradine iodine is the only single atom of iodine that can achieve 100% bioavailability in all 100 trillion cells in the body, not just the thyroid. Not only is it toxin and radiation free, we talked about the problems with sourcing of Himalayan salt. Iodine's almost worse because most iodine supplements are coming from the Asias, where Fukushima is leaking out their water and causing the iodine source to be radioactive. So very problematic. Our accelerated iodine comes from South America, deep in the mines where it's been untouched by man-made toxins. And of course, it's enhanced with scalar frequencies to help detox the body. So that's accelerated iodine, accelerated ancient salt, and you can use the salt on your food, put it on your tongue, put it in your water, put it in your coffee, help with appetite control, help with alleviating your nausea. You can also put it in a bath. So you put 1 tablespoon of the accelerated ancient salt in the bath, and you add 1/2 of a cup of some just dead sea salt you can get off of Google, Amazon, any kind of dead sea salt, and that will be an amazing detox bath. Reduces your blood sugar and all of the other benefits that we talked about. So hopefully that gives you a big picture of Himalayan salt and other salts and the importance of electrolytes. I know we got deep into the science of the chemistry of it, but super, super important. The amazing thing about the accelerated ancient salt too is for all those people in your life that are not healthy, not taking supplements, eating the processed foods, all of that stuff. Even my niece, who doesn't care about anything. She jokes with me that she doesn't want to hear about anything that she should be doing. She loves my salt. Why? Because it tastes amazing. So there is no other salt you'll want to use on your food. So hopefully that was helpful. Thank you for joining me today. If I can help you with your health issues, contact me through the website, SaraBantaHealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you. Join my free group coaching with Telegram with the link below. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health, and you will be a part of an amazing like-minded group to support you on your journey in addition to truly taking control of your health. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products, across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. And as I mentioned, my goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. So help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help. Join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and you can find the accelerated ancient salt, the Iodine, and all of the supplements at SaraBantaHealth.com using coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.